Hi, good morning. So, the Brahmaputra Valley is known for its fertile plains and the vibrant cultures that it has. We are going to discuss about one of the kingdoms that prospered in the Brahmaputra Valley. Uh, that is the Koch kingdom. It This is the area of the Brahmaputra Valley which witnessed the emergence of many powerful kingdoms, but then Koch kingdom is a significant kingdom which is on the western part of Assam. The Tista Brahmaputra Valley's environment marked by very fertile plains, rivers all around, the seasonal floods taking place, and very rich resources, not only of agriculture but also of wildlife and forests. I mean, these are a few of the important considerations when we talk about the state formation of the Koch kingdom. So, you know, the rich, unique topography that we have of this area of the Brahmaputra Valley. Uh, this makes it not only an ideal case for our study when we are talking about ecological consideration as important part of historical analysis, but also because of the fact that uh, the we have already discussed about the kingdom formations in pre-colonial India, in various areas of India, and we have very important and dynamic debates about those state formations. So we have already understood those state formation debates, and now we would like to and understand how and where Koch Kingdom actually places itself in that debate related to state formation. So we will be discussing in detail about the Koch Kingdom, how it emerged, how you know what was the advantage for the Koch Kingdom to prosper. All this today. You can see on this slide, I will this is modern day Assam, and this is something which is uh, graphically developed, so not exact map, but here is the map which is of relevance to you. This is something which I actually wanted to show you. This is the area where the Koch Kingdom, the left side of the in the map in the slide, you can see this is the area where the Koch Kingdom had actually prospered. And then you have the Ahom Kingdom on the right side in the second map. You can adjacent map, you can see, and then you have the Mughal Empire expanding in the 16th, 17th centuries. So this is actually the Koch Kingdom is right on the top of the Brahmaputra Valley. So it's largely called the Brahmaputra Tista Valley, and then major portion of Assam today's Assam is the one which was actually uh, ruled by the Ahom rulers. Now, the Koch kingdom was established when in 16th century the sub-Himalayan Bengal and the lower part of Assam that you see on the map, it was going through some kind of intertribal feuds, and we have already understood why the riverine tracts, the and then the riverine tracts political history, the religious history, their economic histories, they just cannot be understood without the ecological context. And I told you the reason, because these are the areas which are full of rivers all around, And we have seen umpteen cases from eastern India. Like I told you that Bihar is one of such cases. Then you have case of Bengal, particularly the eastern Bengal, where you have so many rivers flowing, and Assam, because Assam is not only about Brahmaputra, but then there are many of the rivers coming from the Himalayas and joining the Brahmaputra. So you have a lot of rivers. So there is a network of rivers all around, even in Assam. So today we will discuss Assam, and in Assam particularly the Koch kingdom, which is politically, which was very significant in the early modern times. It is not only significant because from its ecological position that it is located in the Brahmaputra Valley, but also because of the fact that its history tends to add to the the dynamic debate that we have already discussed earlier on the pre-colonial state formation in India. I told you about the debate that exists between R.S. Sharma's Indian feudalism model to B.D. Chattopadhyay's the early state formations and the processes of early state formation model, the integrative polity model, and then Harman Kulke's model, who improvised rather on Chattopadhyay's integrative model. So to let us, when we, to understand this, let's first consider the broader ecological backdrop of Eastern India, which actually shaped the human societies in these regions. The riverine tracts actually dominated. The entire Eastern India. These were dominated by. We have seen in the case of Bihar and Bengal that it was dominated by the Ganga. In Assam, it is dominated by Brahmaputra and its tributaries, and all these rivers created dynamic environments of some kind of fertility. And also it's not only about deposition of silt and creating large agricultural landscapes, but it's also about the flux that we see, the kind of changes in the river system that we see, which becomes so very important. And the very nature of these rivers also provide some kind of a hint to the historians to understand these the processes of state formations in these areas. Now, in Bihar and Bengal case, for instance, the alluvial plains, you have huge alluvial plains where there were intensive agricultural activities taking place, and you also have very dense population in those areas. So, and the rivers provided kind of trade networks all around. But then they also brought recurring floods in those areas, and that actually influenced their settlement patterns. Even the religious rituals that you find in those areas, they are all tied to the the river deities, and then also the political structure that developed. We will talk about that sometime later. That even the political structure that has developed in those areas were somehow challenged by these environmental what we call the vulnerabilities, the river system itself. Now economic histories, if we take all these ecological settings into considerations, the economic histories also interact with the ecology. They actually get in some way intertwined with the ecology. So the fertile deltas that we have, they supported the rice cultivation in this area, and the landscape actually inspired many myths, practices which were centered around rivers. So all this is very true, not only in case of Bihar and Bengal, but also Assam. And the as in Assam, Brahmaputra is actually known as Mahabahu, the mighty arm of a river that, it actually is considered to be very sacred, and it is also, not only very sacred, but also very, one can say, one can say that it has played a very important role in the economic development, in the political processes that we have. Now, the ecological richness that the Brahmaputra Valley has, it not only includes the rich alluvial plain that it provides, but you also have rich forest resources available in this part of eastern India. And in fact, the huge Brahmaputra Valley also provided opportunities for the migrations to take place in these areas. Now, Koch kingdom, which emerged in this early 16th century in we can say western part of Assam. It is actually, if you look at the map here on the slide, it is part of present day North Bengal. So Koch kingdom included part of that North Bengal and portion of Assam. Now, this Koch kingdom was supposedly founded by, there was one king called Biswasingha around 1515. And, the Koch kingdom, like many of the other early kingdoms, it rose from a tribal roots. Then, the one of the powerful ruler who emerged after Biswasingha was Narnarayan, who is also famously known as Maladeva in Koch history. So they actually integrated many of the tribal societies into their political system. So Koch were actually expanding as tribes expanding and expanding into other tribes, and then including many of the those areas into its kingdom. So by mid 16th century, what we see is that the Koch kingdom stretched along Brahmaputra river's northern banks, and it actually had a huge riverine floodplain as its advantage. Now, ecologically, looking at this area, this position was very crucial for the Koch kingdom, because the Brahmaputra's annual floods deposited huge nutrient-rich silt, and this enabled the rice farming at a large scale, which actually supported the growing population. So there was huge surplus production, and this also in a way helped them to develop strong military. So, and then also of course the government came before that, the state was formed before that. So the surplus production, the rich alluvial plain that the Koch kingdom had actually gave them an economic benefit. So economically, the kingdom actually thrived on agriculture, and then there were also trade in forest products. Like, I told you that this entire area is full of forests. So timber and elephant, they all were used products for trade. And, the control over the river routes, particularly the smaller streams that flow, and then also the Brahmaputra river. The northern part of Brahmaputra, that actually facilitated the commerce with the Bengal and even Bhutan. So religiously, the
Koch rulers also promoted, if you look at their religion and religious history, they promoted some kind of a uh, blend of Hinduism. They also have the tantric practices. They also have some kind of indigenous beliefs, and they they went on to build temples, and then they patronized the Brahmins later on to legitimize their rule. So, and then this is not a one time process. It has taken long centuries to get through this process and then establish uh, the Koch kingdom. So the if you look at the uh, politically, the Koch kingdom, the riverine ecology fostered a very decentralized structure with the local chiefs. You have the Bhuyans, because Bhuyans were also very active. Even when we study the case of the Ahoms, we will study about them. So they were basically local chiefs owning large scale lands, and they were managing flood prone areas. So the Bhuyans were also a challenge for the Koch, like for the Ahoms. Now let us before we talk about the Koch as such, let us get into a little bit, give you a sense of the how do we place Koch kingdom in the existing debate. And I've already told you about the debate circulating around about the pre-colonial state formation, and R.S. Sharma's model, which emphasizes on the Indian feudalism part in early Indian history, early medieval Indian history, where he argued that land grants and it created some kind of decentralized polities of more often in the agrarian context. Now this was then challenged and critiqued by B.D. Chattopadhyay, who highlighted that how the making of early medieval India through processes like expansion of cultivation into the forested areas, and then also the Brahmanical integration of the tribes, and the rise of regional kingdoms from tribal bases. All this is also then evident in Koch kingdom's transition from tribal chieftain to monarchy. So we will see that even Chattopadhyay's argument is also visible in Koch kingdom case. And if you look at Herman Kulke's integrative model, which further refines the views of B.D. Chattopadhyay, who viewed state formation as a processual kind of an evolution from local to what we can say imperial, larger kingdoms. So it involved all this involved legitimization through cults, right? So Herman Kulke has very famously included that aspects to show Jagannath cult as a case. And this was not only done to expand the empire, but also for legitimation and also for resource mobilization. When you expand the state, it actually it is also about having more resources for the kingdom. So the Koch kingdom actually fits very well in Kulke's framework as well. Particularly if you look at its rulers' legitimate authority by adapting Sanskritic titles and forging alliance with neighborhood powers. Like, they forged alliance with even, in sometimes they were in, many a time they were in conflict with Ahoms, but then they also tried to align with the Ahoms also. So, unlike more centralized states in the Gangetic plains, the Koch riverine setting actually led to some kind of a relationship between rulers and the local elites, where the environmental management that is the management of the flood control became a tool of political consolidation. I mean, that becomes very apparent in the case of the Ahoms, not exactly in the case of Koch, because this was an area where you have the northern part of Brahmaputra region and the part of area where you have the large use alluvial plain. But if we look at the lower part of Brahmaputra valley where the Ahoms were ruling, that was challenged by Brahmaputra floods and the waters had to be irrigated. So this adds to the debate of the state formations, but then it is very interesting when we take this with the context. I don't know whether I mentioned to you this earlier or not, but the extension of agricultural practices and establishment of control of some kind of a managerial group on agriculture and irrigation system. This was argued by one of the famous scholars. You must have heard his name, Carl Wittfogel. And Carl Wittfogel, who wrote a very interesting book called Oriental Despotism, in that book he has talked about these, the irrigation systems being provided by the state. And he's basically arguing that, these irrigation facilities and the systems being undertaken on the projects undertaken by the states, they were the major causative factors for the formation of these states in pre-industrial agricultural societies. So the irrigation actually increased the surplus production according to him, and that facilitated its extension. Facilitated its agricultural production, enhancing the agricultural production. And this happened because the state was in a position to handle them, then manage them. So they not only managed the irrigation system, but through this they were able to control the state. So, but we will see that contrarily, this evolution of technology has been regarded as the technology of irrigation. This has been regarded as a major variable also for the state formation. So, why I'm saying so, because state was largely dependent on its income from the variety of sources. It is not only about the agriculture production. You have other sources of revenue. I mean, there are trade activities, tribute extractions taking place from the neighboring areas. So you have all these different sources, and then you have an organized bureaucratic mechanism that takes place to control the society. So controlling power of the state increases with centralization of the authority, and this enhancement of authority is not only because of the power that the state enjoys by managing irrigations. Do you understand? Because in the case of early medieval Indian states formation, wherein Chattopadhyay and many others they have argued, he has talked about various other factors. I mean, these historians talk about various other factors. They say that there were other factors which also play a very important role in the state formation. So legitimization of power in that sense, because they were arguing that legitimization of power is one of the most important things, and that was another essential requisite for state formation, and that should also be considered. So it is, so in that sense, why I'm mentioning Wittfogel, because Wittfogel's argument is very important for us. His work is important for us to know, because he has given an important intervention in this kind of historical debate, whether the societies, the states that grew in early times, whether they grew because of the the irrigation projects that were undertaken by the states, or not. I mean, they certainly played a role, but they were not the only significant factor we have seen in that case. So even in the case of the Koch kingdom, we have we will see that it is not only the agricultural system that was being managed by the Koch rulers, but there were other parallel processes going on. Now, one of the very similar unique cases of another very interesting northeastern state, the Metis kingdom. Now, somebody who wants to research on the Metis kingdom of Manipur, the way we are not going to talk about this Metis kingdom in detail about in the class, but then they also have a very interesting case, and they had also grown from inter-clan feuds to and from tribal militia society to some kind of a kingdom. So they basically, the Metis kingdom overpowered the other clans, that the neighboring areas, and then the kingship developed, and then there were also formation of states. So you have many different kinds of cultural influences of Hinduism, Vaishnavism, and so basically here also, I mean, Metis case also tells us that there is a process going on, legitimization process going on through integration of various religions and religious cultures. And similarly, and somebody wants to work on the Jantia kingdom, the Meghalaya's Jantia tribes. So they also have a evolutionary state formations. Now, all these are interesting cases, but we are today only concerned about the Koch kingdom. Now, the Brahmaputra Valley, as you know, it is having an extensive fluvial network, and just a minute. Why the PowerPoint has gone? Okay. Right. So you have the Brahmaputra flowing right in the middle of Assam, and it provides very fertile alluvial soil in the entire region. It has played a very significant role in not only for the Ahoms but also for the Koch kingdom, because they were through these rivers, not only Brahmaputra but with various other rivers, they were able to expand agriculture, and then when they expanded agriculture, many of the tribal societies were peasantized, and then this process involved the shift from tribal shifting cultivation to settled agriculture. So this is an area where you have the initially the peasantization going on, that is the knowledge of agriculture entering into the tribal areas, and then through the integration of these tribes into mainstream, these states are being formed. Now the Koch rulers had actually emerged from originally from Mongoloid tribe, and they had settled in this area for centuries, even much before 16th century, when their kingdom was actually established. Now, Tista is one of the very important rivers in the Brahmaputra Valley. So we have Brahmaputra river also, but for the Koch kingdom, Tista is also one of the important rivers. And apart from Brahmaputra, the Tista river created a dynamic landscape for, it was suitable for agriculture. And it also helped in providing fertility to the soil of this upper part of Assam, the much western and upper part of Assam. So this allowed the fertility, allowed the cultivation of rice and then various kinds of pulses, even tobacco, and oil seeds. Various products are being produced now. So, and I told you that historically there was a process of peasantization that has taken place. Now, peasantization was accelerated by the Koch policies. So they deliberately followed these policy of expanding agriculture into the tribal areas, and they in fact invited many of the caste migrants from Bengal, particularly when in the early one of the early rulers, I'm forgetting his name, I think is Durlabh Narayan. He was the one who had invited many of the migrants from Bengal to settle in the agricultural areas and then promote agriculture and cultivation here. So and then because of the surplus economy that they had after the expansion of agriculture, they were able to create a huge standing army of it is claimed that they had some 425,000 peasant soldiers who were allotted rent-free land in those areas. So, this is how the kingdom actually became so very powerful. The Ahoms had risen in Brahmaputra Valley as a power much before than the Koch kingdom, but then their geographical settlement was largely in the upper Assam valley, the upper valley of Brahmaputra, and they had their own the strategies of irrigation, including the tribes, or because they had a huge area when they settled there. They introduced various kinds of the culture of wet rice, which they had brought from the place they had migrated from. But then once they established themselves in the upper part and they wanted to expand further into this part, the western part of Assam, they were challenged by the Koch kingdom. So the Koch kingdom, so you can look at the map, the second map here. Just adjacent to Koch kingdom is the Ahom kingdom, and these are the areas of conflict between the Ahom and the Koch. So we have long history of conflicts with the Koch and Ahoms. Now, as I told you that the Koch kingdom largely actually prospered and expanded in the Brahmaputra and Tista Valley, which is also known as Koch Bihar, and which was the term Koch Bihar is actually derived from the Koch, which was a very significant power in the 16th 17th century in Assam. So now let us look at the geohistorical background. I told you that Tista Brahmaputra basin is geographically very diverse region, which is bordered by many rivers. So you have not only Tista, you have Karatoya river, you have many other rivers, Barandi river. So you look at the first map here, these are all rivers flowing through the Koch kingdom. And you also have the Bhutan Duars. Duar is one of the very common title in Assam today, but then Duars are basically nothing but they were like what you call as passes. So you have the passes to go towards Bhutan in north, and then you also have the confluence of the Brahmaputra river in Bangladesh in the southern part of it. So this area is featured with a network of, not only the network of rivers, but also you also have many passes which allowed many, you know, migrants to enter into these areas. Now, the rivers, of course, facilitated trade, they facilitated agriculture, but then it also caused challenges. You know, the kind of floods, the annual floods that came in these rivers. So, but then these floods in some way also protected the region from the invasions which were coming from the passes, the duars, right? So the different mountainous passes that it had, which connected Assam to Bhutan, it had rich timber, the bamboos, you know, many medicinal herbs. You have many huge wildlife, including the elephants. So, and then you also, I mean, these people here developed a professional elephant catching in this area. So, elephantry in some way also developed in this area, and which became so very significant economically for the region. So, it is not only the fertile plains which has supported the surplus generation, but it also had many other sources of revenue in the area. If you look at the the society, you have lingual people, communities living in those areas, because on the one hand you have the Koch, which they themselves were one of the tribes earlier on, but then you also have the other migrants in those areas because of the duars that it had. So many of the people from Bhutan also entered and settled in those areas. And in fact, this area is also famous for many of the temples that were constructed. So political history of Tista Brahmaputra Valley, which, you know, initially in ancient times it was known as Pragjyotishpur. So those who are from ancient Indian history must be knowing about this. So Pragjyotishpur, Kamrup kingdom, and that was the kingdom which was later on acquired by the Palas. So the Palas, who had expanded from Bihar towards, and they were expanding into Bengal, they conquered this area. Now, by the 13th century, the power of the Palas had declined, and then you have gradually the emergence of these different kingdoms. So Ahoms emerging in Upper Assam, and the Koch kingdom emerging in the lower part of western part of Assam. So, I mean, this was also an area which was invaded earlier by the Muslims, the Muslim invaders, the Turks. For example, the Bakhtiyar Khilji in early 13th century invaded this area. But then, and then later the Mughals also took control of the area, so they had a conflict. The Ahoms were able to resist the Mughals, but the Koch were not able to resist the Mughals. So the Mughals were able to take control of the Koch kingdoms, which became actually a challenge for the Ahoms also. So Koch kingdom, although it emerged as a very powerful kingdom in the 16th century, but then it was challenged by the Mughal, the expanding Mughal power in eastern India. So after Bengal, they conquered Koch area also. Now, this is roughly the the history of the Koch kingdom. But then, I just wanted you to um give kind of a sense of the, you have to, when you read, I will be sending you a reading a very interesting book which has been published very very recently. So I'll be sending you few chapters from that. It's a book very recently published by Primus. It's called Kingdom Formation in Pre-Colonial India. And it is a book which is having a historical case study of the Koch kingdom, and it is written by Rup Kumar Burman, who is actually he is a professor of the Jadavpur University, who wrote about the Koch kingdom in Assam. So he's worked extensively on the state formation process that were in this area of Assam, and how Koch kingdom was established. So just to conclude what I said, that the rest of it you can read in the readings. So I'm not going into the details of the politics and the political history and economic histories, but the formation of Koch kingdom was a major political development in the history of this area of Tista and Brahmaputra region. And the process of the foundation of this kingdom from kind of a tribal society was in some way identical to the evolutionary state model that we see in other states. For example, in early, the peripheral states that B.D. Chattopadhyay and Urban Kulke have talked about. However, the progression of centralization of power that we see, or the leadership that emerged and the way it was institutionalized, and the kind of development of the state structure that has taken place, it is somewhat also different from what other early states have seen. It is, the Koch case is somewhat distinct, because here the certainly the clan-based village of the Koch were transformed into a kind of a kingdom, because this area was going through a phase of political uncertainty, and then conflicts were going on between different tribes in the area. So intertribal feuds and conflicts were one of the important aspects of the Koch kingdom, because that has never happened in other early state formation cases, which has, it might have happened in other cases, but this has not been highlighted as historical case studies till now. So this is something which is very interesting, because you have internal conflicts going on, very intensive conflict, and within that scenario of political conflicts, the mutual conflicts and the political uncertainty that it had, the Koch kingdom emerges as a powerful kingdom. So Koch kingdom reaches its territorial peak in the 16th century, and then the kingdom was then divided into two parts also in later part of the 16th century. Then you have the Koch Hajo kingdom, and then the other kingdom, the Koch Bihar. So you have Koch Bihar and Koch Hajo. These were the two brothers who divided their the big Koch kingdom into two parts, and then they also entered into the mutual warfare. So you also have kind of a state formation taking place, and then once the state has been formed, there is a feud going on for the power sharing, and then you also have the centralization going on at the same time in these areas of Koch authority. So the main branch, which is of the Koch Bihar, it was the one which had earlier accepted the Mughal rule, and the later the other half of the Koch kingdom, the Koch Ajo, always challenged the authority of the Mughals. Now, it is when the for the short period of time in late 16th century, these kingdoms had went into these two parts, but then there was another revival which had taken place in the first after the first quarter of the 17th century, when Koch kingdom was united once again against the Mughals and the Ahoms together. So Koch kingdom then reinvents itself. So there was one ruler called Pran Narayan who had tried to bring the two different coaches, like the Kuch Bihar and the Koch Ajo together. Now, the Mughal invasions were quite frequent it had started happening in the late 16th century, and they were forcing the Koch to accept the Mughal suzerainty. But then the Koch decided to accept the military assistance from Bhutan in 17th century, and in fact there were many Bhutanese who migrated to these area, and they became important partners in the Koch kingdom. So later on, the Bhutanese had become so very powerful that ultimately the Koch kingdom had to then many of the Koch rulers had to decide that we should keep ourselves away from these Bhutanese influences. So then ultimately they had to take help of East India Company. So they roped in East India Company in 1773 to then finally expel the Bhutanese influence from the kingdom and the Bhutanese forces which had dominated the Koch kingdom. So you have a very interesting history of the Koch right from the 16th century down to the 18th century. Now, so far as the economic incentive is concerned, I told you that they had various kinds of various ways of extracting or gathering the surplus from apart from agriculture. And so it is not only agriculture, you also have the forest and the wildlife which has provided surplus to the Koch kingdom. Now, one of the most important source of revenue for them was the huge tract of fertile land which had been under their control. And this was the exploitation of the surplus from this huge agricultural area was the main source of revenue for the Koch kingdom. Now, when it comes to religion, they had attached themselves to Lord Shiva, which was a popular deity of the Hindu pantheons at that time. And then they also had constructed the famous Kamakhya temple, which was there is a debate about it. There are mentions in various inscriptions that the Kamakhya temple was built earlier, but then the Koch rulers actually gave a lot of grant for the modern construction of the temple. So there are debates about it, but the construction of the temples of the popular deities was a strategic move by these Koch rulers. It was a major step because they wanted some kind of a legitimacy, and they paid adequate attention to the adoption of the cultural practices such as you have the Neo Vaishnavism and the institution of Vaishnavism, like the non-tribal Vaishnava culture, that they included and integrated into the mainstream Koch society. So the Koch kingdom basically adopted, the various Hindu gods like Shiva. They also adopted Devi and Durga. So, in fact, if you read Burman, his book, Rup Kumar Burban's new book, he mentions about these different Hindu gods which are identical to the tribal deities that existed in those areas. So the appointment of Brahmins in their in the temples which were constructed by the Koch, it actually was a process of cultural integration and Hinduization of the tribal people. So the Koch kings, like many other early modern, early states, they also went through this process of integration of many of the religious tribal deities from those areas for their legitimation and expansion. So it will look as if that the kingdom formation process and the legitimization that the legitimization part that the Koch kingdom followed is similar to what we see in many of the earlier state formation processes. So the the process of what we can say, the political process, the political formation, which was initiated by the Koch in the Koch early Koch chiefs in the Tista Brahmaputra valley, was basically, if you look at it, it was basically a kind of a very evolutionary process. So it evolved gradually, and then it also, if we read it very carefully, it shows that there was some kind of a relationship, some kind of a very close relationship of the Koch kingdom with the tribal culture. So Koch, in that sense, it is not very the Koch actually the identical type of what we see in the early Indian state, because here you also have the centrally organized strong bureaucracy which emerges in this area. Now Burman has actually argued that there is a distinctiveness to the Koch kingdom which actually distinguishes it from the early state formations that had taken place in other peripheral areas. So it has a very distinct kind of so it actually the state formation process is actually, it appears to be very similar, but if we read deeply, this is what Rup Kumar Burman argues, is that it actually is quite different from the early state formation. But Burman could be right about it because he's emphasizing so much on the bureaucratic part and the centralization part. But if you read his book carefully, I have read the entire book, and I could see that there is, his major portion of the book is dedicated to the state formation process, and then at one point he's talking about the centralization undertaken by the rulers. So in some sense, I think indirectly Burman also accepts this idea that there is a state formation process going on, which is quite similar to what we find in other peripheral areas which B.D. Chattopadhyay and Harman Kulke talk about. So we will see that in Ahom case it is quite different. Ahom's case is certainly very different from what we see in Koch kingdom, because the ecological setting was completely different in that area.